What was your "it seemed like a good idea at the time" story? Holding onto my friend's car mirror while skateboarding on a newly paved parking lot. I let my 14-year-old cousin at the time try driving the family car. I was like 18 back then or 20, and I told him it's easy to drive an automatic car, basically like driving a go-kart. Told him gas was right and brakes were center. I forgot to mention that changing the gear to D will automatically have the car move. We both panicked and hit a fucking tree in front of us at probably 1 mile per hour. Luckily we were in our neighborhood by a dead end. Snow water skiing. Me driving the snowmobile across a snowy field and my little brother skiing behind holding a tow rope. 2 broken legs. Me and my friend used to play a game where we threw a Swiss Army knife up in the air at nighttime and then ran away from it. With the knife part out. Shooting each other with fireworks on New Year's. One landed directly in between my eyes. Luckily, it didn't go off and I wasn't injured. When I was a kid I tried to ride my bike up the trunk of a tree so I could kick off and try to land it and it'd be really cool. Turns out a tree trunk is rounded and so you'll just slip off the trunk and hit your head on the tree. My brother still gives me shit about trying to ride my bike up a tree. Hey, you know those degenerates who you stay out drinking with until sunrise every other day? Why don't you live with them for the last 2 years of law school? That won't cause any issues at all. Cue 2 years of abuse to my body and liver and more than a little strain between me and my friends at the time. Overall it was fun, but definitely not a good idea. So I was in Uganda with my family, and we see a large about 5 feet tall, curled up leaf hanging about 8 feet off the ground. We're told that these leaves curl up and fall out the trees, and they're pretty heavy, so it can be dangerous to have it fall on you. My dad and I think wouldn't it be helpful of us to get this thing down. So, we're there whacking it with sticks, trying to get it down, to no avail, when my dad says, "Hey, climb up on that wall there, son, and jump. Grab it and then pull it down." Well, that sounds like a swell idea, Dad. So I do just that. I don't manage to get it all the way down, but as soon as I hit the ground, I get this burning sensation in my elbow. Turns out there's a hive of Ugandan mud wasps living in this specific leaf, and they do not take kindly to young men trying to tug their home down. So I'm just sprinting back to the office where the rest of my family is sheltered from the sun, and I practically have 2 elbows on one arm at this point while, as my dad described it later, an army of large, black blots give chase. I make it back inside and my arm is numb, except for the searing pain in my elbow. Thankfully, there was no further reaction. The pain lasted only around 3 hours and the swelling was down by the end of the day. That being said, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. Even worse than the time I broke my arm into 3 pieces while arm wrestling. Playing sled dog with my newly rescued husky and a longboard on the hilly streets near my house in college. Snapped my right forearm in half and had to walk a mile back home to get a ride to the hospital. So back in the day my brothers and I were shooting a bow and arrow behind our house. We had a proper backstop and a nice target on a bale of hay. After about an hour we were getting bored and one of my brothers had a stroke of genius. Lit fucking light one on fire. So there we are wiring rags 2 arrows and soaking them in gas and shooting stuff. Didn't take long and half the yard was on fire. We'd shot pretty much every flammable thing we could burn in the yard. Since we were running short on stuff to shoot, my brother decided to launch one in a 45 degrees arc over the woods behind the house. We all watched sore laughing and giggling. When it hit the apex was when it dawned on us that this was in fact a really stupid fucking idea. All 6 of us sprinted off into the woods in the direction it had been shot. Wasn't hard to find and it'd light an entire little meadow on fire. So we ran around stomping out fires for an hour. When we finally got the fire put out we were sitting by the creek and my oldest brother looks at us all and says, "Dad never hears a word about this." Starting a career in television in the late 90s. I mean, the internet is cool and all, but it's still way too slow to ever compete with 200 TV channels, right? When I was 15 my best friend and I just got new BB pistols. They were the Walter CP99. Looked identical to the real Walter CP9 with a removable magazine and no orange tip. We were playing with them in the back seat of his mom's car. They weren't loaded, we were just excited and wanted to take them out of the box. She knew we had them out and didn't think anything of it. This was the late 90s BTW. Before going back to his house she went through the drive-thru at Burger King. You know where this is going. She's ordering food with 2 large 15-year-olds holding guns and pointing them at everything. Fast forward 30 minutes, we are pulling into their driveway and his dad comes running out of the house yelling hysterically. One of his friends just called and said he heard on the police scanner that they were looking for his vehicle with two white males holding a female hostage at gunpoint. Few minutes later several police cars pull in the driveway, jump out with guns out, making everyone get on the ground. It took some explaining on his dad's part about us being a bunch of dumbasses. 15-year-old me couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about, but 34-year-old me looks back and realizes that might be the dumbest thing I have ever done. In high school, my friend discovered that he was particularly agile at running toward a wall and kicking off of it into a backflip. He would do this all day, every day, before school, at lunch, etc. One day we were inside a classroom and the teacher had stepped out for a moment. Of course he took this opportunity to try his little trick. He didn't, however, take into account the fact that drywall might not support his weight as well as the brick and concrete walls he'd tried before. His leg ended up busting straight through the wall to the other side, into a classroom full of students taking an exam. So I wasn't actually in the class taking the exam, but to this day, I still imagine how strange and hilarious it would be to be sitting in that class then suddenly see a leg burst through the wall. Makes me smile just thinking about it. I ran across the street with my eyes closed. When I was 14. I didn't get hit by a car. However, I ran into a tree head first and cut my face and knee open. For all of you asking what my thought process was, it is as follows: who am I kidding? I have no idea what I was thinking. In 5th grade I invented a game, where you get the swing as high and fast as you can, then at the bottom you run off it really fast. Mistimed it, landed on my head on asphalt, got a serious concussion. Being roommates with someone I had a huge crush on. It didn't end well. I went on a solo trip to Costa Rica when I was 26, am a fairly petite female. I speak no Spanish. The ecolodge I was staying at helped me arrange a guide for an all-day hike. We were flown by 4-seater plane into the jungle, a 26-hour walk to the nearest town. We landed, Jose and I hopped out, and the plane took off again, leaving me, Jose and his machete alone for the day. Thankfully it went okay, but as soon as that plane took off I realized I had made a bad choice. Applying for a PhD position. Shitty pay and no free time in sight for the next 3 years. Thanks to it I despise working in science like never before. On a rainy day, I saw a hitchhiker near the university asking for a ride. He looked the part of a student. Although I never pick up hitchhikers, I felt sorry for him standing in the rain and gave him a lift. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. He told me where he was headed, so I went out of my way to drive him there. The guy just kept staring at me and said very little. When we arrived at his destination, he wouldn't get out of my car, no matter what. Finally, when a police officer came along, I told him to hop out or I'd call the cop over for help. That ended it. But if the officer hadn't come by, I have no idea what might have happened. Moving in with my girlfriend. I fucked up. It's a disaster that I should have seen coming. Getting taped to a cart, drunk, during a music festival. And then getting rolled down a hill towards a lake, where a lot of people pee. I had just finished this bike ride with my scout troop and we ended it at the side of a river. So waiting for our parents to pick us up, the boys all go to a rope swing to fuck around in the river. It was absurdly shallow, the furthest swing would still land you in 3-foot water, average lazy swing was 2 feet deep or so. Mom comes, some dad hollers at me that she's arrived. I run back until I can see her getting out of the car and yell, "One more swing Mom, I'll be right back." She seems in a good mood, says okay, starts chatting with other adults there. So not 2 minutes later I walk up to her with a broken arm. I had gone back for that one more swing, screwed up and planted my wrist into the shallow water, broke my arm, and got out of the water saying bye without telling the kids what I'd done. Just sorta walked up to my mom, "Hey, I just broke my arm. Sorry." She was not pleased. Like, seriously, flick my bick. You had to go for one more swing. Come on, let's go get a cast, you idiot. In college a large group of us hiked up to this abandoned mine shaft at night, took turns squeezing through a small crack in the mountain. The main entrance was closed off, walked down a long dark corridor with our flashlights, then set up a campfire in one of the large clearings at the end and proceeded to get wasted. All fun and games until a rather large girl got too drunk and couldn't walk on her own. Getting her out of there was a whole fucked up ordeal. Thought a few times during the process that we were going to have to leave her there in the dark and go get help, especially when my flashlight started to die. Making bows and arrows with my friends when I was around 13. To ensure that the arrows got stuck in some tree or whatnot, we duct taped 80mm nails at their ends. Then we went shooting around the nearby field with complete disregard of others' positions. I did not take an arrow to the knee, but to the palm of my hand, remembering the friend saying to the other, "No worries, I won't hit him." Luckily nothing serious came from that. When I was a teenager, my brother, cousin, and a couple of friends decided to try to steal a Coke vending machine by tipping it over into the back of a Ford Ranger pickup and take off. We were like, "Shit, well just put it in our garage and have plenty of soda and we'll refill it." We had one of those keys for them. It was 2 in the morning and we're all wasted. This was mid-90s mind you and way out in the country. There was a little store with a machine. We backed up and my brother and I got it rocking back and forth and finally blam into the back of the truck. It lifted the front end of the truck off the ground and as soon as it landed in the bed my buddy started hauling ass with me trying to jump into the bed with the vending machine and my brother hopped on the back of the vending machine riding it like a majestic horse. But we forgot to unplug it and for some reason it was just enough that it pulled the machine out the truck with my brother on it and crashed to the ground. We were young, dumb, and bored as hell. But it made perfect sense to me then. When I was younger I tried to show my sister that I could swing without holding onto the swing so I did and I fell. Dating a girl that had a crush on me. Didn't know her all that well beforehand other than that she was relatively quiet and an outsider at school. Relationship eventually ended because I wouldn't let her tie me up and put a knife to my throat during sex. Zero issues with the tying me up part, but the knife was a deal breaker. She did a presentation that compared some hentai shit to the Bible in our religious instruction class a few weeks after we broke up. The teacher actually let her show a few minutes of a hentai movie before intervening.